Belinda Genser is the CEO of Spark Pharma and was sitting in the boardroom with Claude Mutiba, who was the CFO of the firm and her closest confidant. She read the room and didn't like the look on Claude's face. Claude pulled up a quote-unquote Yale list, which was a rundown of firms that had publicly announced that they had curtailed Russian operations to some extent following the country's invasion of Ukraine 3 weeks prior. This Yale list was not so coincidentally made by a Yale professor, and Belinda felt the urgency to take a stand as this list was making its rounds in the media. A global pharmaceutical company based in Brussels, Spark had obtained 24 countries of operations. One of these operations had a manufacturing and sales team in Moscow. Pressure had been building between the shareholders, government officials in Ukraine and Belgium, and worried citizens across the EU. This pressure was caused by many multinationals who were in the process of ceasing operations in Russia. This decision wasn't straightforward, especially since Spark provided a wide array of treatments for a wide array of conditions, ranging from neurological disorders to diabetes. Belinda made note that the firms who had already pulled out weren't suppliers of essential goods, and to that point they were able to distance themselves relatively easily. To refute this, Claude said that on the list he saw some healthcare companies. Belinda ultimately knew that Claude was right, and knew that the Ukraine war was a prime example of his huge changes in societal expectations about how companies should behave in response to political and social events. Companies could and should no longer stand on the sidelines, and customers, employees, and investors were making sure that the companies got involved about these concerns. After the invasion of the war happened, Spark temporarily closed down its warehouse in Ukraine out of safety and vowed to support its employees and donate medical supplies to the region. Linda made a point that she knows it doesn't look good to have a relationship with Russia, but she feels an obligation to the team in Russia and the customers who aren't responsible for the war. The humanitarian response may not only mean to stand and support Ukraine, but it also could continue to provide medicine to the people of Russia. Russia provides less than 3% of Spark's total sales, so it wouldn't be significant to pull out. However, the wider implications of a decision to pull out is the question of would it affect sales in other countries? Claude asked where Mila stood, the company's head of global communications and PR. Belinda said that she's worried the company is headed out for a PR crisis and that they should pull out completely. Just then, there was another tweet saying that any company that remains operational and pays tax dollars to Russia is funding the war against the people of Ukraine. With that, Belinda knew that she couldn't remain neutral and that she had to make the right decision. Winston, Belinda's husband, was discussing the issue with her. Winston made the comment of how he couldn't imagine having to tell his patients and that the medicines they needed were no longer available to them. Belinda, to counteract this, said that Russian citizens can still have access to generics of the drug, but it wouldn't be as effective. Winston brought up the idea to stop selling non-life-saving drugs, like allergy medication, and to continue to sell medicines that people can't live without. Belinda is worried that the option is too double-sided, however. Winston said that she took this job at Spark because she always focused on ways to do well by doing good. Belinda was struggling to find a win-win situation when there was immense tragedy unfolding in Ukraine. There is no obvious right choice, and there is no chance Spark could emerge from any decision without facing backlash. Along with this, she could be excused of sympathizing with China, which had not denounced the war, simply because her husband was British Chinese. She knew that the criticism-proof decision wasn't possible, but she wanted to make a call that she could stand by ethically and morally, and in the face of any attack, even the groundless ones. Belinda the next day joined a Zoom call with Dmitry Guzit, who was general manager of Spark's Russian division, and Ivan Mendeleev, his chief of staff. They had to speak with her about the company's decision, and she wanted to hear their perspectives. The major did most of the talking at first, expressing his concern for the company's employees, patients, and the country. He said that he has put so much work into the manufacturing plant and developing the sales force that it would be devastating to see it all crumble. Belinda said that if she decides to leave that it would only be temporary, and once the war was over they would return to full operations. Ivan then made a point to say that Putin had already begun developing legal means to seize the assets of companies that withdraw, meaning that there was no point in return. Ivan doesn't think that any corporate pressure will sway Putin's decisions either. Both Ivan and Dmitry have their own views, however not in agreement over the fact that they will stand behind whatever Belinda decides to do. She then asked Milan to meet with her, and Karl von Post, who was one of the more active members of Spark's board, to talk through the options. Karl was the director of several other EU-based firms with their operations in Russia, so Belinda valued his counsel. Mila understands the case of studying in Russia as part of the humanitarian decision, but she knows the public won't see it like that. If they decide to stay, There would be boycotts and social media campaigns against them. So, to the degree Mila says that they should pull out of Russia to maintain their reputation. Carl asked if partial withdrawal was still an option, which meant that they were considering staying and selling products at a cost to avoid earning profits that would generate tax dollars to the Russian government. Mila communicated that it was hard to portray the partial exit. Anything short of a full exit would be criticized with the media and the public not being forgiving. Belinda knew that her decision would set a precedent for Spark's stance on future geopolitical crises. Carl and Nia know that Spark is a do-good company, which makes it even more pressure on Belinda to make the right decision. One expert said that it doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing situation. She recommends that they should still continue to operate in Russia while donating all proceeds to those who are being harmed by the war. Belinda needs to relate social issues by asking herself how the issue relates to the purpose of the company and the values. She and Mila need to explain it internally and externally, making sure all stakeholders understand the reasoning behind their decision. They need to make sure they don't get stereotyped for not adhering to the sanctions, and to prevent this, they should reach out to pharmacists and others alike. Another expert says that Belinda needs to plan and announce a full, yet phased withdrawal from Russia. This phase will allow for accommodation of Spark's Russia's team and its customers. A full exit is necessary to avoid backlash from stakeholders and the media. Finally, one last expert says that Spark should stay in Russia for the time being but downsize its operations. This means to stop the sale of any non-life-saving medicines and only sell for essential drugs at the cost to avoid making a profit or paying taxes to the Russian government. At the same time, the company should support Ukraine with humanitarian aid. I would have to agree with the first and third expert the most. Although Russia's government is in the wrong, it is entirely not fair to punish all the employees and citizens who rely on medicines and their jobs. However, they should do everything possible to avoid promoting war, such as donating the profits to humanitarian organizations in Ukraine and by decreasing the value of their medicine to avoid paying taxes. Furthermore, they should only sell the life-saving drugs needed.